I'm sorry, I can't attend Ken's graduation ceremony. Henry said, suddenly called for an overseas business trip 2 weeks before our son's graduation. But strangely, his voice remained cheerful even on the day of the ceremony. Perhaps it was also something he looked forward to, being abroad after a long time. I attended the graduation ceremony with my mother. Then, after returning home, Ken muttered softly, "Dad, you're lying about work." Huh? Why would you say that? This is the proof. Because. I widened my eyes as I looked at where Ken was pointing. My name is Abby Miura, 39 years old. 6 years ago, I gave birth to my eldest son, Ken, and have been living happily with my husband Henry and our family of 3. But now, there's one big worry. It seems Ken has a habit of telling lies. I consulted with his kindergarten teacher and friends, and they all unanimously advised that the solution is to shower him with love. In my first experience of parenting, without a clear answer, I've been doing my best to raise Ken with all my heart. Of course, I consulted Henry about it. However, Henry, who should be directly involved, seemed completely detached. Well, then you just have to show him more love, he said self-righteously while drinking beer. I hug him every day. I scold him when he does something wrong, but I also praise him and show him affection. I'm doing everything I can. But what else can I do? I said this to Henry, but he didn't take his eyes off the TV. In frustration, I couldn't help but raise my voice at Henry. Hey! Are you even listening? Huh? Oh, so it's about showing more love, right? It seemed like he hadn't been listening at all. I sighed deeply. And the same conversation repeated. So, I was thinking, maybe we could spend more time together as a father and son. Finally, Henry shifted his gaze from the TV to me at that line. But his expression clearly showed annoyance. Then, he deliberately made a noise while placing the beer on the dining table. What? Are you saying this is my fault? Do you even know why I work? I appreciate what you do. And I don't blame you either. But since we have 2 children, shouldn't we? Oh no, this beer tastes terrible. I'm going to bed. Interrupting my words, Henry said that and got up. He's usually a good person, but when he's in a bad mood, he can lash out like this. He's emotionally immature, you see. Seeing Henry walk away like that, I couldn't help but sigh again. Ken continues to tell lies at kindergarten as usual. Every time the teacher tells me about it, I feel so frustrated. But one day, something happened that changed my perspective on Ken's lies. It was one day when I want to go to Grandma's house. Ken said that and threw a tantrum one evening. Ever since my father passed away, my mother has been living alone. Sometimes we visit her together, and I thought Ken wanted to play with his kind grandma today. But it was pouring rain outside. My mother's house, which is my childhood home, is a 30-minute drive away. Let's call it off for today. I need to start preparing dinner, and it's raining outside, right? Let's plan to go on a day when Ken's kindergarten is closed next time. But Ken didn't agree. He usually understands after we talk for a while, so this was unusual. But Grandma said she's coming today. I sighed at those words. Did Grandma say that? There's no way. There was no contact, it's just Ken's usual lie again. I raised my voice. Enough already. You're always telling lies. No one will listen to you anymore. It was the first time I raised my voice at Ken like that. Ken's shoulders trembled, and he stopped for a moment, but then he burst into tears as if something had ignited inside him. And he kept pleading to go to Grandma's house while crying. In the end, I gave in to his voice, gave up on preparing dinner, and contacted Henry. I didn't have time to cook dinner, so I thought he could bring something home. So, I'll just go to my parents' house for a little bit. I reported to Henry about Ken's request. Then Henry clicked his tongue disapprovingly. What followed after was something I couldn't believe. You should just ignore Ken. And you're asking me to bring home food when I'm tired from work? Don't mess with me. It was my fault for relying on Henry. Those words made me realize how naive I was in my thinking. Well then, fine. Just grab something on your way back. We'll do the same. Giving up, Henry quickly changed his attitude. Oh. All right then. I'll just grab some store food and work. Got a lot piled up. since you're here, take your time at your parents' house. Was he so reluctant to stop by the store for us? Mom, hurry up. Ken, waiting at the door in his shoes, didn't give me any time to think about Henry. Yeah. Although I had thoughts, I hung up the phone and headed to the door with my bag in hand. While on the way to my parents' house, I contacted them. However, my mother, who usually answers the phone right away, didn't pick up that day. Was she cooking or something? Grandma, she's not picking up the phone. I talked to Ken about it, but he didn't say anything. When we arrived at my parents' house, as soon as I stopped the car, Ken unbuckled his seatbelt and jumped out of the car. Hey! That's dangerous! Ignoring my words, Ken ran straight to the entrance of the house in the rain. I stopped the car and followed after him. However, as soon as we entered the house, I sensed something was wrong. Wake up! Grandma, wake up! Ken shouted. Realizing it was serious, I rushed to the house. As expected, there was my mother lying on the floor, with Ken by her side. Mom! I hurried over to my mother as well. We called an ambulance and rushed to the hospital. It turned out she had suffered a stroke. It sent shivers down my spine to think what might have happened if we hadn't gone to my parents' house today. Grandma, I'm glad you're okay. Ken smiled at me. I hugged him tightly and cried. What's wrong? Grandma's okay, right? Ken may not understand yet. Tears flow not only in sad times, but also in moments of relief. Then, I began to think that there might be some meaning to Ken's lies and casual remarks. Even when I conveyed this to Henry, he just laughed and said, it's just a coincidence. Though it wouldn't hurt if he thought about it a little with me, it seems this person still lacks the awareness of being a father. In the end, I consulted with a kindergarten teacher who is more empathetic than Hisashi. Well, they're not lies that hurt people. For example, saying, I won't eat the tomatoes in the school lunch tonight because I don't like them. Or, my friend isn't feeling well, so it might be better for them to go home today. Those kinds of lies are common. Looking back, they seem different from lies made to protect oneself. The teacher said that while recalling Ken. After all, there must be some meaning behind Ken's lies. Thinking so, I reconsidered and decided to trust Ken. Until now, I had been frustrated with Ken's lies and tried to discourage them, but instead of that, I decided to think about why he would say such things, considering the background. However, since telling the lie about Grandma asking to come over to my mother, Ken stopped lying. It was strange, but if that's the case, then so be it. Things would continue as they had been. Without interrogating him about the past, I continued to interact with Ken with the same affection as before. We spent several months like that, and Ken was finally approaching his graduation day. My mother was discharged from the hospital safely and agreed to attend the graduation ceremony together. Henry, have you decided which suit you're going to wear for the graduation ceremony? I asked Henry during dinner one day. Any suit is fine. It's not that simple. We need to send it for dry cleaning, so please choose carefully. I don't want you saying later that you wished you had chosen differently. Ken never took his eyes off his smartphone, even when I asked him. Apparently, it's work-related messages, and lately, he's been coming home late and seems really busy. He also seems to have a lot of business dinners and sometimes uses his own money to give sweets to clients. But I'm sure it's just temporary. Even Henry was finally able to take a day off on the day of the graduation ceremony. Even Ken, who rarely has time to spend with Ken, seemed happy that he could attend the graduation ceremony. Although there are times when I get frustrated, for Kota, Ken is his only father. That's just the way it is. However, one day, 2 weeks before the graduation ceremony, Ken said, "Sorry, I can't make it to the graduation ceremony." His words caught me off guard. Huh? Why not? I suddenly have to accompany the department head on a business trip abroad. Passport's still valid, right? Yeah, it's fine, but, Ken frowned at my words. What's wrong? Got something to complain about? I can't say anything if it's for work. But I really wanted him to be there for the graduation ceremony. Is it arrogant of me to think that? He couldn't make it to the sports festival or the Christmas party either, all because of work. It's the last day I'll see little Ken at kindergarten. No, it's nothing. But arguing about it now won't help anyone. I had to force myself to accept it. And then the day of the graduation ceremony arrived. While we were getting ready, Ken was checking his suitcase. He's apparently going to a neighboring country for 2 nights and 3 days. Despite saying, "It's a shame I can't make it to Ken's graduation ceremony," his smile seemed almost eager. Henry left home earlier than us. Ken didn't say anything to Henry. He must be feeling down because Henry couldn't come. I wanted Ken to go to kindergarten with a smile. With that feeling in mind, I smiled and called out to him. "All right, Ken, let's get ready." At my words, Ken relaxed his expression slightly and nodded. The graduation ceremony was touching. Ken responded energetically and received his graduation certificate. He also consulted with the teacher about various things, causing some trouble. As I recalled various things, my eyes moistened, and my mother handed me a handkerchief from beside me. It was a very nice graduation ceremony. Next month, Ken will finally be in elementary school. After having lunch together, we returned home, and it was already 3 p.m. It's time for Dad to start working already? Let's contact him later. As I looked at the clock and said that, Ken murmured quietly with a serious expression. "Dad, he's lying about his job." I was taken aback by his words. Huh? Why on earth would he do that? Ken hesitated for a moment at my question. And then, as if he had made up his mind, he said, "This is the evidence. Because, without this, he can't get on the plane, right?" Ken said so and pointed to something. I looked at it and widened my eyes. A passport. Oh no. The item there was indeed a passport. I hurriedly picked it up. There was no mistake, it belonged to Henry. "It's okay. It's not for work." "What do you mean?" I asked Ken again. Then, Ken began to speak hesitantly. About the time when my mother collapsed and I didn't believe him, causing trouble. So this time, he said, he believed in his own judgment and secured evidence first. "Do you have to do something like that?" "Dad will be in trouble," I said to Ken. "But Dad is causing Mom trouble." "I understand that. I don't know why, but I can feel when Mom is sad," Ken said loudly, and I calmed down to listen to him again. Even when he didn't eat tomatoes at kindergarten, he saw a future where I apologized to him for preparing tomatoes. When he noticed his friend's poor health, he saw a future where everyone would catch a cold if nothing was done, and he saw himself suffering from a fever. He saw my sad face. The same goes for my mother's incident. I couldn't believe it. Could such a thing really happen? But I didn't feel the slightest bit that Ken was lying anymore. Surely, there must be various conflicts in this child's heart. Despite that, he worried about me and took action. I braced myself and listened. Why does Dad make me sad? Why does it matter if it's not for work? Dad's, on a trip with a woman, Ken said, looking straight into my eyes. Even though I was prepared, those words made me feel dizzy. "Mom, are you okay?" I nodded firmly in response to Ken's words. Honestly, I didn't have much affection for Henry. But if Henry wasn't really on a trip and missed Ken's graduation, it wouldn't be forgivable. "Mom, I don't need Dad anymore," Ken said clearly. I was taken aback. I was the only one who thought Ken needed a father. Or rather, I just wished it were so. Finally, I realized that. Yeah, you're right. Dad probably won't come back anyway. It won't make much difference if it's just us two. Ken nodded in response to my words. He didn't say anything more, but surely he knew that being with Henry wouldn't lead to a happy future for me. Ken must have realized that. In order to do that, it's necessary to first find out what Henry is doing right now. I calmed my mind and made the call. But there was no answer. A few minutes later, I finally managed to have a conversation with Henry when he called back. "Hello? How are you? Is work finished?" I said cheerfully to set the trap. On the other end of the line, Henry replied. "Nah, it was busy. Tough with the language barrier. I'm going out for drinks with the boss now, so I probably won't be able to call tonight." Henry was in high spirits. Surely, he was enjoying his trip. He's having so much fun, he seems to have forgotten that today was his graduation day. There was no conversation indicating that he was even aware of it. "Were you able to leave the country safely?" I asked. At my question, Henry replied, "Hey, are you making fun of me?" Of course, why wouldn't I? I'm not some scaredy cat just because it's an international flight. But how did you manage to board the plane without a passport? What? I think you're there illegally? Henry sounded flustered at my words. Huh? Well, he stammered, unable to come up with a coherent response. I chuckled. Please, enjoy yourself to the fullest. Wait, hold on. What do you mean? Passport? Huh? I have no obligation to explain to you. Goodbye then. I hung up on Henry. I smiled at Ken, who had been watching with concern. After that, Henry's calls came in several times, but I ignored them all. I didn't know where he was, but he must be panicking by now. The next day, Ken and I packed up all our belongings and moved them to my parents' house. My mother was surprised by the sudden move, but she understood when I explained the situation. The furniture I bought with my savings before marriage was mine, of course. We took what we could use to my parents' house and disposed of the rest. I never thought I had so much initiative. But since Ken had acted for my happiness, I couldn't ignore this fact. While moving, Henry called again. I intended to ignore it, but I accidentally pressed the apology button, and on the other end, I heard Henry's angry voice. What's going on? Why is there nothing at home? It seemed he had returned home. He seemed shocked to find the house already emptied. Oh, you're back. I heard it was supposed to be a 2-night stay. Must have been a pretty close overseas trip, huh? Cut it out. What's with this nonsense? Who's being selfish here? It's decided that we don't need such a father. I'm divorcing you. I stated firmly, and I could sense Henry's flustered state on the other end of the phone. Regardless, we should meet and talk properly at least once. I went to the municipal office to get the divorce papers and returned home the day after the call. Since I couldn't take Ken with me, I asked my mother to look after him. My overly worried mother asked my brother to accompany me in case something happened. I arranged for my brother to wait in the car while I entered the house alone. Are you here? As I called out, Henry hurriedly ran towards the entrance. For a moment, I tensed, expecting him to raise his hand, but instead, Henry knelt down and bowed his head. I'm sorry for lying about going overseas. Even faced with Henry's sincere apology, I remained strangely calm. It didn't matter if it was overseas or domestic. The issue was who he went with and for what purpose. But he must have thought he hadn't been caught. Henry kept babbling about work and business dinners incoherently. When I sighed heavily, Henry flinched, his shoulders trembling as he fell silent. So? What's the relationship with the person you went with? Huh? It's the boss. The boss? You mean you're providing assistance to your boss? Henry's face turned pale at my words. It seemed he hadn't even imagined that I knew everything, as he struggled to speak, his mouth moving without producing any words. I know everything, I said, placing the passport in front of Henry, who remained kneeling at the entrance. This was the only evidence I had, so I didn't leave it in the house but took it back to my parents' home. As I placed it down, a letter slipped out from between the pages of the passport, causing Henry to freeze. You didn't engage in sugar daddy dating, did you? Did you enjoy your time with younger girls in Florida? The letter that emerged was addressed to someone named Amy, written in Henry's handwriting. It contained unsettling phrases like, I want us to remain close and Amy has a charm that my wife lacks. To top it off, it detailed their first trip to Hokkaido together, expressing a desire to create many memories, providing clear evidence of his infidelity. From the contents, it was evident that the recipient was involved in compensated dating. There were words used that wouldn't be associated with a mere affair. You're despicable. Not only did you betray your family, but you also spent our living expenses on strangers. What's unforgivable is that you prioritized that girl over our son. I exclaimed, feeling boiling anger within me. I can't tolerate having a husband like you. Perhaps sensing that reconciliation was futile, Henry finally agreed to the divorce. I hired a lawyer to seek compensation from Henry and the woman named Eitan. Since the letter explicitly mentioned their physical relationship, obtaining compensation wasn't too challenging. However, Henry pleaded that he couldn't afford the compensation or child support, begging me to reduce the amount. However, I didn't feel any inclination to reduce the amount or show leniency. After consulting with a lawyer, a portion of Henry's salary was garnished. Henry was furious about it, but that was none of my concern. It seemed that the connection with Amy had been severed as well. And it's no wonder. Being involved in an affair scandal and having no money, there was hardly any benefit for her to associate with a broke old man. Both parties were at fault, but the man who falls for it is also foolish. I had connections with Henry's company as well. Originally introduced through a friend who worked at Henry's company, I arranged to meet that friend at a coffee shop near Henry's workplace to inform them. It's been a while. You haven't changed a bit. What's up? You suddenly wanted to talk? Emilie is a friend from my high school days. If I don't bring up the topic of divorce with her, Henry probably hasn't reported it to the company yet. There's also the matter of dependent support. We need to handle the paperwork soon. Well, you see. It was when I was about to speak to Emily. Oh, Emily. Is she a friend of yours? An elderly man addressed Emily. I also recognized him. Because he was the president who attended both mine and Henry's wedding reception. I stood up. Yes. She's the wife of Henry. She's my friend. Oh. Henry's. He must be a very good father, right? I couldn't help but wince at the president's words. Without noticing my expression, the president continued. He always takes time off for his son's events. Yes. I heard his son graduated? Congratulations. He said it was a very moving graduation ceremony. I forgot to force a smile at those words and lost my composure. Both the president and Emily seemed to sense the discomfort. What's wrong? Emily asked. And I explained the situation to the president. Originally, I had intended to tell Emily. I didn't expect the president to be here, but Henry had also lied to the president. I don't think that's forgivable. After hearing my story, the president's smile from earlier completely disappeared. I see. That must have been tough, he said with a stern expression, yet his words were warm. I'm sorry for burdening you with such a strange story. No, I'm glad you told me. Well then, I shall go. Oh, by the way, if you need anything, feel free to reach out anytime. With those words, the president gave me his business card and left the shop with a solemn demeanor. According to Emily, the president is famous for being devoted to his wife and values his family greatly. I wonder how Henry's actions, exploiting his family, appeared in the eyes of the president. I have many allies. Looking at the business card, I felt reassured. In the end, Henry's affair and sugar daddy activities became the subject of gossip at his workplace, leaving him ostracized and diminished. He had apparently been portraying himself as a devoted family man all this time. That's probably why the president had taken an interest in him, but now, Emily informed me, he seems to have completely faded into the background. It seems that on the day I spoke with Emily and the president, there were a few other employees present. Our conversation must have attracted attention when the president arrived, and it seems they overheard us. But I haven't told a single lie. Henry brought this upon himself. Also, this is just a rumor, but it seems Henry submitted a resignation letter and got scolded by the president. Emily informed me one day. Scolded? The president apparently said, you now have to spend your whole life making amends to your child and ex-wife. Is it wise for a 40-year-old like you to quit your job? Earn child support and participate in raising your child properly. As a father, that's all you can do now. I couldn't help but be moved by Emily's words. Thanks to the president, I'm sure there won't be any delays in child support from Henry. In a workplace where he has no place, he should just do his best, I think. Ken safely entered elementary school and spends every day energetically. I decided to start working, and my mother supports me every day. There are hardly any lingering effects from the stroke, and I never thought I'd have such happy days. Ken no longer tells lies or makes nonsensical remarks. You won't have to worry about mom anymore. And he said that. Sometimes you hear stories about children having mysterious powers. I never thought Ken was like that, but in the end, it seems he has given me happiness. From now on, I want to work hard so that Ken himself can feel that happiness.